Good morning, everybody. This is Melissa, your realtor, on today's episode of Coffee Talk with your favorite realtor, Melissa. Today, I decided we're going to talk about the Fair Housing Act. There's been a lot of stuff, as everyone knows, going on in the world with discrimination and this is fair and that's fair and this isn't fair and that's not fair. So I decided to talk about, since we're doing real estate on our talks, about the Fair Housing Act. Now I'm not sure how many people know what it is or if they've even ever heard of it. So I'm just going to read a couple things that our National Association of Realtors provides us. And as we've talked before, a realtor compared to just someone who sells real estate, the thing that separates us as realtors is that we are bound by a code of ethics, and part of our code of ethics is that we are to not to discriminate against so let me just read how it says. So the Fair Housing Act was an act that was set in place years ago, and there were two amendments. Both one was in 2010 and another was in 2013. So based on the Fair Housing Act, National Association of Realtors, also called NAR. So if I say NAR, that's what it is. The way they describe it is, it says NAR opposes discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and national origin. And when we become realtors, part of our code of ethics that we are bound by include this fair housing. So if you've ever felt that you've been discriminated against when it comes to searching for a home or purchasing a home, then be aware that this act exists and ask your realtor for a copy of it so that so that you can be informed on what all it covers and how you can protect yourself in that manner. It goes on to say the policy is embodied in NAR's Code of Ethics. That's what I just said. And it authorizes sanctions in response to finding that a member has violated any fair housing law, including local and state laws that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. That was a new thing that they updated the policy in 2010 and 2013. And if I remember correctly, and I can correct me if I'm wrong if anybody knows this, but I think it came right around the time where there was a lot of discrimination against people their sexual orientation and their gender disposition. People were discriminating against selling goods to them, and when people were starting to be able to get married that were of the same sex and things of that nature. And if I remember correctly, the Code of Ethics started including this amendment for fair housing, included that sexual orientation and gender identity. And that was back in 2013 was the newest update, 2013. Another thing I wanted to talk about with fair housing, has anybody heard of it? I mean, if you're watching, raise your hand or wave at me or something, clicking your little button or make a comment or a thumbs up or something if you've heard of it. And if you've not and you want a copy of what it is and what it says, then please private message me or comment and I'll make sure I get that for you. So just in a nutshell, I guess an overview, fair housing is more than just a list of do's and don'ts. It's more than just rights and penalties and mandatory continuing education, which us realtors have to have to renew our license every 2 years. We have to do continuing education. As stewards of the right to own, use, and transfer private property, Fair housing protects our livelihood, our business as realtors, and depends on a free, open market that embraces equal opportunity. So make sure when you're working with somebody, I guess my advice would be to make sure that they do recognize the equal opportunity and that they are following that discrimination. There's a thing called steering. So, if someone says, I want to live in this specific area, or I don't want to live in this specific area, or hey, how are the schools here? Or hey, how is the crime there? Legally, as realtors, we're not allowed to tell you, oh, well, this neighborhood's not so good, or hey, this school's not so good. What we can do is advise you to go and do the research on your own and choose if you think that that's a good area or school or whatever for your family. That is part of fair housing as well. We cannot discriminate against a certain area because of its crime numbers or its grade level for the school rating. We can't do that. You have to make that choice on your own. That's part of our code of ethics by following the fair housing laws. Another thing it says on here if you ever want more information about this too, if you don't want to ask me to give it to you, which is fine. If you go to nar.realtor/fair housing, all this stuff, that's where I'm reading this from. I wanted to make sure that I'm bringing you the right information, so I have it right in front of me on my computer. I have my phone sitting on my computer so I can look at you guys and read at the same time so I'm not messing anything up. So I was saying, realtors recognize the significance of the Fair Housing Act and confirm our commitment to upholding fair housing law, as well as our commitment to offering equal professional service to all in our search for real property. And NAR actually abbreviated the Fair Housing Action Plan to abbreviate it to spell ACT, A-C-T. And it emphasizes accountability, it emphasizes cultural change, and it emphasizes training in order to ensure that our realtors are doing everything possible to protect housing rights in America. So, like I said, if you want a copy of it, our thing, then you can either go on and just type in fair housing, Google it, and find what you want on it, or you can go to the National Association of Realtors. There's a lot of information on there for that. So some people may have asked, what about COVID-19? As COVID-19 has been hindering us, and it has made things a little bit harder to looking for clients to go into homes and for sellers even to open up their home with the fear of, how am I going to protect my family? How am I going to protect the people coming in from not bringing the virus in? So one of the things that NAR did during all of this is we included a questionnaire, like a COVID-19 screening questionnaire that we gave all of our clients as we were gearing up to show properties, and even during the brunt of it, where everybody was on lockdown. We as realtors, we've talked about this in one of the other episodes, we are considered an essential business. People need a place to live. Now, we were very careful on, bringing people to see homes just because they wanted to go see. But if there was a true need that someone needed to move for whatever reason, we made sure that we protected you guys by including this screening questionnaire. Some people may have asked, hey, does COVID-19 qualify as a disability under the Fair Housing Act? And so they asked consumers about it, and it's kind of presents its own little, as NAR puts it, novel of legal issues, which includes members must navigate their fair housing duties during the pandemic. So given that it may be disabling in the short term and long term and can even cause death, we were wondering is COVID-19 a disability entitled to protection under the Fair Housing Act? Like, how are we going to protect our clients and their other people's clients, despite the dangers that it's highly contagious in nature and poses to others? Like, yeah, it's a virus, but is it really a disability, and can it be included under the Fair Housing Act? So what we had decided is that NAR, the National Association of Realtors, decided that we're going to recommend to treat COVID-19 as a disability for the purpose of the Fair Housing Act in these three ways. So while the issue of whether COVID-19 is a disability can ultimately be determined by a court, it is advisable to treat individuals with COVID-19 as protected under the Fair Housing Act. Real estate professionals are not required to provide assistance or housing to someone who poses a direct threat to the health and safety of others, but we do have to consider whether a reasonable accommodation exists that would mitigate that threat. Real estate professionals also need to conduct an individualized assessment to determine whether a reasonable accommodation exists to mitigate the threat, such as virtual showings or requiring the individual to send a proxy to view the property. So those are some things that we decided to do during all this and that we're continuing. Even though things are opening up, we are still continuing to do these things. You know, we keep hearing all this stuff of there's going to be another wave and it might be worse than the rest. So we're going to continue this on until this threat is no longer a threat. Might be more months, it might be years. We don't know, but to protect you, this is the policy that we're doing. So with that being said, we are allowed as realtors to use a COVID-19 screening questionnaire. But the rule to keep it under fair housing and equal opportunity, we have to ask all individuals. If we're going to ask one person to complete the questionnaire, we have to ask everybody to complete the questionnaire. I can't go and say you're my client and say, okay, I need you to do this questionnaire to make sure before we go and look at these houses. But then I go and I try and show a property to a family member and be like, oh, you're good. I don't have to go through this questionnaire. It doesn't work that way. That's not equal opportunity. I can't do that, and no one else should be doing it either. If you're going to require the questionnaire, if an agent's going to require a questionnaire to one, they must require it to all. We don't have to use these. I myself have asked the questions. I haven't filled out a physical paper, but I have made sure that I've asked the questions to keep everybody safe. So one of the things with this questionnaire that we have to be careful with is we cannot ask about other underlying health issues that increase an individual's susceptibility to contract COVID-19. We can just ask them the simple questions of, have you had a fever in the last of 100 and, what was it, 100 and, I have to get my sheet out, but you ask the question, have you had a fever? All the same ones that you see like in the doctor's offices and the on signs in stores and restaurants. Have you had a fever? Have you had these specific symptoms? Have you been around anyone who has had any of those symptoms or has had the virus? And depending upon the answers to that of whether or not we can go ahead and show property or hold open houses or even allow people into an open house. Those questions are at the front of the door so they can answer that before they even walk in. So we can either in writing or verbally, like I said, I do mine verbal. I don't do a piece of paper. If we get another wave and it's really bad again, I will be changing my MO to doing it on paper. So I have, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So they could have told me that and then been lying. But having them sign it, I think, is probably going to be a better option. So while a written document may prove useful in the event of future litigation to show that you routinely ask the same question of all individuals, collecting and maintaining the personal information can create a risk of disclosure. So if you're an agent and you're watching this and you decide to do the written part, just make sure you do just like you do with all your other files. Make sure you're having them in a hidden spot so that other people can't see their personal information. I mean, ideally you just need their name and their signature, but you don't want that out and on your desk while you're meeting with another client and they can see all that. You can show them a blank one, but and the same thing, like if you're a client that you're meeting and you're concerned, you can get your own copy of it, or you can ask your realtor what process they have to keep your information safe, if that makes you feel better. That's all I really have for you guys on the fair housing. I know I wasn't really in depth, but that would take forever because it's really a long legal mumbo jumbo that half the time I can't pronounce some of the words. So, like I said, if you want any of that information, you can Google Fair Housing Act. You can go to the National Association of Realtor website and get all that same information. Find out how your realtor should be or can be protecting you if you feel like that you haven't been. But I'm going to leave you with this. This is the Fair Housing Declaration that us realtors, what we're bound by as part of our code of ethics. So from me to you as your realtor, I agree to provide equal professional service without regard to race, color, orientation, gender, religion, gender or sex, disability, handicap, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity of any prospective client, customer, or the residents of any community. I also agree to keep informed about fair housing laws and practices and improving my clients' and customers' opportunities and my business. I agree to develop advertising that indicates that everyone is welcome and no one is excluded, and expanding my clients' and customers' opportunities to see, buy, or lease property. I agree to inform my clients and customers about their rights and responsibilities under the fair housing laws by providing brochures and other information. I agree to document my efforts to provide professional service, which will assist me in becoming a more responsive and successful realtor. I agree to refuse to tolerate non-compliance. I agree to learn about those who are different from me and celebrate those differences. I agree to take a positive approach to fair housing practices and aspire to follow the spirit as well as the letter of the law. And lastly, I agree to develop and implement fair housing practices for my business and to carry out the spirit of this declaration. If you'd like a copy of this, it's backwards, but I have a copy of it, and this is something that I promise to each and every one of my clients. I hope you guys enjoyed today's Coffee Talk with Melissa. As always, if you have questions or you need any information, please feel free to reach out to me. You can text me, if you can private message me, you can comment on this video, or you can just make an appointment to call me and we can sit and chat. I can take you to coffee for real coffee. Until next week, have a wonderful day, enjoy the weather, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.